Tales of the Sea, by John Thomas Mawson, 18. God's Way of Deliverance. Or, How the Sea Saved Leyden. Many and great are the difficulties that often arise in the minds of those who are awakened to the need of their soul's salvation, as to how this can be brought about. They know that they are sinners, guilty, unsatisfied, and in Satan's power, but how God can deliver them and yet be perfectly righteous they cannot tell. And truly the matter is beyond the wisdom of men to solve. But God has displayed his wisdom as well as his love and power in the death of Jesus, and his death is the solution of all the difficulties. There we see our foes vanquished, our deep need met, and God glorified. The way in which the sea saved Leyden may help us to understand it better. From October 31, 1573, to October 3, 1574, with the exception of a few days only, Leyden was surrounded by a large Spanish army and exposed to all the horrors of a siege. King Philip of Spain was determined to make the city bow to his power, and the Protestants within acknowledged the authority of the Pope. But the people had tasted the liberty and enjoyed the light which an open Bible gives, and they were determined to resist the Spaniards, choosing rather to die than submit to Rome. As the days passed into weeks and the weeks into months, the distress in Leyden became terrible, for so completely was the city invested by the Spanish army that it was impossible to get provisions into the town. In consequence of this, famine stalked abroad in the streets, and men and women died on every hand. The Duke of Alva, who commanded the Spaniards, sought by threats to make them yield, but they bravely replied, "When all our cats and dogs are eaten we will devour our left arms while we fight with our right, before we will yield." He then tried flattery, making great promises if they would but surrender, but they had proved his treachery before and were not to be deceived. Their only reply to his flatteries was, "The fowler plays sweet notes on his pipe while he spreads his nets for the bird." Ah! These Hollanders were not only brave but very wise, and Alva's threatenings and seductions alike failed. How often the devil acts as did this Spanish commander. He often sends flattery and offers great benefits to people, but his end is always to destroy. He promised great things to Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, and they listened to his promises and were caught by his flatteries, and sorrow, sin and death were the result. He is still the same old deceiver, blinding men's eyes, transforming himself oftentimes into an angel of light, but with always the same object in view, to hinder them from obtaining God's salvation and to destroy them forever. Beware, young reader, sin may charm and appear fascinating and the world may display its attractions, but the devil is behind it. Look to the end and remember the answer of the Hollanders to the Duke of Alva's flatteries. The fowler plays sweet notes on his pipe while he lays the net for the bird. Meanwhile matters were only growing worse within the city, and though William Prince of Orange, with the famous beggars of the sea fleet, laden with provisions for the starving inhabitants, was but 15 miles from the town, he could not help them, for the ships could not sail over the land, and the Spaniards were well able to resist any attempt to land provisions. At length William fixed upon a seemingly desperate plan. It is well known that a large part of Holland lies beneath the sea level and that the waters are kept out by huge dikes. His plan was to pierce the dikes and allow the sea to overflow the land, in the hope that his ships might sail quite up to the distressed city. The inhabitants were informed of his intentions by carrier pigeon, and eagerly did they wait, and earnestly did they pray that he might be successful. They had looked upon the sea hitherto as their greatest foe, and untold wealth had been expended to keep it at a distance. Now they realized that deliverance could only come to them by that which they had always dreaded, the inflowing of the sea. How like our case is this! Death is looked upon as the greatest foe of men, and what will not men give to keep death at a distance, but it is the only means by which salvation can come to us. If we are to be saved from Satan's power, and have our souls satisfied with living bread, we must look to death. But whose death? Not our own, or that of any other mere man, but the death of our Lord Jesus Christ. Don't forget this. It is because Jesus died for us that deliverance comes within our reach. The dikes were cut, but the ships were long in reaching the city, for a strong east wind was blowing which kept them out at sea. This made the Christians in Leyden pray the more earnestly, and one night, in the midst of their pleadings with God, the wind suddenly changed, and blew quite a gale from the sea. On came the flowing waters, not only bearing the ships laden with food to the starving citizens of Leyden, but also sweeping away from before the city the foes that had harassed them so long. In the midst of the night a terrible crash was heard, and it was feared that the Spaniards had stormed the city's walls. Instead, it was the now friendly sea which had broken down the wall and brought the ships right into their midst. Leyden is relieved rang through the streets as loudly as the feeble folk could shout. And this was true. The Spaniards had all fled before the advancing sea, leaving behind their ammunition and baggage, and the people of Leyden never saw them again. Nor did they forget to return thanks to God, who made the sea as well as the dry land. And is there real deliverance for reader and writer alike? Thank God there is. His wisdom is shown out in the death of Jesus, for he has taken that which was indeed our foe, and made it to be our way of escape. Satan's power is destroyed in the death of Jesus, for by dying he destroyed him that had the power of death, which is the devil, that he might deliver those who through fear of death were all their lifetime subject to bondage. Hebrews 2 verses 14-15. We know now that he is raised from the dead and imparts to all his own people a new life, and instead of being miserable and unsatisfied they can feed upon himself, the new food, which can fill the heart with joy and satisfaction. Those who feed upon him can say, like a little Scotch boy said when dying, "Oh, Jesus is sweet, sweet."